So my wife just ordered something called a crescent bag, and honestly, it hurt my feelings a little bit because she's got a bag maker right at home, and she didn't ask me. What the heck? So today I'm making my own, hopefully better version, and you can make one too with the free PDF pattern linked in the description. So whether you're watching along or sewing along, let's get started. If you're using the pattern, follow the download instructions, print it out, and tape all the pieces together. And if you've watched our videos before, you'll know I always transfer my paper patterns to something more rigid, and that's a pretty simple and boring process, so we didn't bother filming it this time. I started off by tracing and cutting all the pattern pieces, and while you watch me do that, I'll tell you about today's sponsor. Just kidding. I cut out the body panel, the shoulder strap, which I made 31 inches, and the buckle strap. Both strap pieces will need to be lined with another layer of leather, but I'll do that later on. It's optional, but I decided to line this bag with a cotton upholstery fabric called Poodle Driftwood, which is a name I don't quite understand, but I definitely won't forget. I thought our pattern lining would be a nice touch, and I'm a fan of this houndstooth design. So a bit of backstory, this bag was going to be called an origami bag, but that was before I changed a bunch of stuff. But all that to say, you'll still need to make 3 important folds to create the bag shape. Start by holding the corner of the leather that has the star on the pattern. Fold it down across just like this. Once it's in place, you can keep it there with a clip. To sew that fold closed, we actually need to hand stitch it so that it lays flat. I prefer to glue the 2 pieces together and punch the stitching holes at the same time, so I started off by marking a 1/4 inch overlap line on the smaller side, then scuffed and applied contact cement on both pieces. Once that was tacky, I could join them together. The larger side will overlap with the smaller one, and if this seems hard to work with, you can trim off a bit of material from the corner to make these pieces easier to manipulate. We're about to cut off that corner anyways, so don't worry about it. After it was glued, I marked an 1/8 inch guideline for my stitch line. I also made a mark 8 1/8 inches from what will be the start of my seam, so I know where to stop sewing. I used our 3mm diamond chisels to punch through both layers and started saddle stitching. I usually like to hand stitch towards myself, but it's easier to stitch away from myself in the case of this bag. It's a pretty deep rabbit hole, so I'll save an in-depth saddle stitching tutorial for another day. The biggest thing to remember when saddle stitching is consistency. Whatever you do, do it the exact way each time so your stitches look consistent. The section of this corner that isn't sewn will be cut off to create the gusset. Fold the side down so that the hand stitch seam is on the side, just like this. Being careful not to cut through the thread, cut the corner off just below that stitch line. After that cut, go ahead and turn the bag inside out. Then I went over to the sewing machine to sew that gap closed. Once it's turned back right side out, you can see a great looking gusset. So just repeat those steps exactly on the other side and you've created the shape of the bag. I set that aside to start working on the lining. And for time's sake, we didn't show how to make the optional pockets, but we'll link a tutorial in the description for this zippered pocket. So whether you have pockets or not, the next step is to fold a 3/8 inch hem on the top, which I actually forgot to do, which meant I had to do it after these pieces were sewn together, which was a bit more awkward, but worked out fine. Before you sew, double check that the right sides of the fabric are touching. You should also make sure not to sew the top closed, and start and stop 3/4 of an inch from the corners on both sides. Next, fold the fabric just like you did with the leather and sew in the gusset. I'm just eyeballing this to be close to the size of the leather gusset. Trim off the excess when you're done sewing. The zipper I use for this bag is a 20-inch No. 5 metal zipper from Linzip. It comes pre-finished with stops, but I actually trimmed those off. But before separating the zipper, I made dots on each side so that I could make sure those sides got matched up properly. With this style of zipper, it won't work right if either the chain or the slider is installed wrong. I also folded it in half to mark a line in the center, and this is where I'll start attaching it to the bag. I used 1/4" basting tape along the edges of the leather and basted it down so that there was about 1/8 inch gap between the edge of the leather and the zipper teeth. I needed to cut small slits at the midpoint of the zipper to help it form around the curve in the middle of the bag. You could also do this process using glue, but basting tape sticks really well to most leather and fabric, and it saves a lot of time compared to gluing. Once both sides of the zipper were basted in place, the next thing to baste is the lining. But remember, I had to go back and baste the top hem, which is what I should have done earlier. My goal when basting down the lining fabric was to have it the same distance from the zipper teeth as the leather. I want these layers to match up so that when I sew, the leather, zipper, and lining all get sewn together. When I started sewing this part, I left a little over 1/2 inch unsewn at the corners, which will help when installing the slider. I realized the leather was a bit firmer than I had first assumed because I had more trouble positioning it under the foot compared to the other times I've made this bag with different types of leather. It was still doable, but worth noting if you're trying to decide which leather to use, you might want to consider that. I'll have my recommended leathers linked in the description below. After sewing, I could install the zipper slider on the same side where I made my dots. Once I made sure it slid smoothly, I can move on. And make sure you do this because I did learn the hard way to make sure that the zipper actually works. The last thing to do with this part of the bag for now is to punch the rivet holes on the straps. I positioned the zipper in the middle of the two sides and clipped the leather in place. I matched the angle of the strap template with the bag to find the correct spot to mark the holes. And if you did this right, they should be the same distance from the stitch line. Once you found the right spot, go ahead and punch the hole through both layers. The last stint of this project is the straps. I glued them to another layer of leather with Phoebing's glue, making sure to leave the rivet end of the shoulder strap unglued. I trimmed away the excess leather to create the final shape and punched out the holes from the pattern. And I don't always do this, but the pattern has stitch lines marked for you. That's because the tips of this bag need to be sandwiched between and nuzzled into this triangle shape. And that would be pretty tricky to just eyeball, so if you mark the points of the stitch line like this and connect the dots with a wing divider, you'll be good to go. I started off with the longer shoulder strap and sewed around the perimeter, finishing off with the triangle shape. If you printed your pattern in color, this part of the buckle piece will be in red, and that's to show that it gets sewn separately from the rest. While it's flat, sew around the perimeter as denoted with the black color. Then once you've installed the buckle and the keeper, and folded this piece in half, sew the pieces together in this triangle shape, as denoted by the red lines. With things sewn, I could bevel and burnish the edges for a nice finished touch, since I'm using veg tan leather. The burnishing machine makes finishing the edges on a long strap like this so much faster than doing it by hand. The final step is to rivet the strap to the bag. I decided to use number 12 rivets and burrs, but double cap style rivets would work great as well. The handy press die makes installing the washer and doming the end of the rivet a breeze. Before I finished the last rivet, I attached a little bonus piece I made with a 1/2 inch strip of leather and a snap hook to clip your keys onto. I just sandwiched that piece between the body layers and held it in place with the same rivet that connects the strap to the body. And so that's it. This is my take on the crescent bag. I'd love to hear what you think about it in the comments. So So that's it for this project. I hope you learned a thing or two or enjoyed watching it, or maybe both. And if you want to make one of these for yourself, remember there's that free pattern in the description, so make sure you download that. Subscribe if you haven't already, like the video, all that fun stuff, and we'll see you in the next video.